Good morning, friends. 5 a.m. or thereabouts. Freshly out of the world of sleep, dreams, and travel. And OBE Journal number 12. And a few notes on the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto. One day of which, of the 3 days, I attended yesterday. And I will append this will be part A, part B, some little snippets of video material that I took for the record yesterday, with some chat from Stephen Greer, and a little bit from Paul Hellyer, and Victor Vigiani, who presented former Canadian Defence Minister Paul Hellyer with a Lifetime Achievement Award, and a much celebrated figure here, both in Canada and the UFO community. Paul Hellyer was the Defence Minister in about 50 years ago, actually, and did not know much, if anything, about UFO incursions into Canadian airspace then, but prompted by his how shall I say, great reading in his retirement, great reading, research, and writing. He has written many books. As you will see from the video, prompted by Victor to give a talk, he stepped up to the plate and become one of the very few former cabinet ministers anywhere in the world that has spoken directly and sincerely and confrontationally about the endless interaction that the visitors have with us and with abductees and those in the military and the secret government with whom they have co-projects. So just in case you didn't know that. Such conferences are always stimulating. You always meet people that want to chit-chat about this, that, and the other, their experiences, what they've heard. And I had a number of interesting encounters with people, including on the way home, driving, that I was psychically contacted by the two beings that I talked about last night. And I said, well, I didn't see you at the conference. And they said, well, that's because we came astrally. We didn't come in our physical bodies. And I thought, well, I don't know if they were teasing me or just sort of saying that that's what they had to do. I can't remember. But just to complete that little thought, and quite amusing. And the Canadian researcher, Grant Cameron, who you may know from his presidential UFO site, which he's had on the web for years. And he's the leading authority on what various US presidents knew or tried to find out about the whole UFO situation when the intelligence agencies would try to, keep it from them, mostly successfully. Anyway, Grant, you can find his other websites and contributions on YouTube quite easily. I just would like to mention one thing that I thought was quite fascinating that he talked about in his speech, and then I queried it about him later. Portals, teleportation portals. I had heard much about this, as you may have yourself, from various whistleblowers and retirees who don't give a toot anymore. People like Bob Dean, for example, who you'll find interviews on Project Camelot and different things. Years ago, they said, when I say years, I mean 5, 7. I don't mean 50. Usually government employees, military employees. He spoke quite frankly and in detail about the teleportation portals that he says, are situated in underground areas of large Air Force bases. I forget which one, it doesn't really matter. There's plenty of them in the States, and I believe there's one in Australia too, in the Pine Gap. And this is just the usual UFO scuttlebutt. people in the community, we all know about this stuff. Whether it's not on the front page of the New York Times or the Globe and Mail, but we don't care about that sort of thing. Um, anyway, Bob, Dina, and others have mentioned the portal. You go down an elevator, there's many floors underground in these large Air Force bases. Um, you get out, you go along a corridor with a person that knows where to go, or a guard or whatever, and maybe two or three other people, and it's an office corridor with doors leading off of it, and you turn a corner, go in a certain door, and there's a fairly empty room with a doorway in the middle, and that's the portal. And they say, without much ado, you walk through this doorway, and when you're on the other side, it's just a doorway. I don't know what it's made of, but they don't say it's anything fancy or, whirring and clanking and, swirly stuff going on in the middle that you might see in a movie. You walk through, and then when you're on the other side, you're in the Mars base, the base on Mars. You're there, 3 steps and you're there. And there's other portals that'll take you to the moon base, apparently. There's a base on the dark side of the moon, there's one on Mars, and it's an alien-human, cooperative venture, and we've spoken about it before. Anyway, so that's the background. Grant Cameron said, and publicly, and not whispering in my ear, he said this publicly, I asked him about it later. He's in, like a lot of researchers, he's in contact with a lot of people, either anonymously or he'll give you their names. And all sorts of people. Film producers in Los Angeles, people in the military, ex-military people, other researchers, people that have advised presidents, yada, yada, yada. And when I say advisors, I don't mean cabinet people, people that are just advisors on this, that, and the other. And he mentioned a bunch of names, none of which I seem to know, but who's neither here nor there. And he says, and he has to research this farther. This is an ongoing project in the last 6 to 8 weeks. And he tours around. He'll be talking at other places. I think he said he was going to Vegas today. Maybe not to deliver a speech in Vegas, maybe a couple of days from now. I mean, I can't remember. But very soon, and these folk travel around. So he might be coming to your town. Anyway, somebody, the information he has get this, back engineered the portal. You wouldn't think anyone would have the chance to do that. Who are they going to let to back engineer the portal? No, I think they'd kill them first. But it appears, and he has no reason to disbelieve his information that he's been given, although in a couple of months he might say, well, I'm sorry, I think it was a hoax, and but right now he thinks it's real, and I trust him, and he's definitely a very sincere researcher. He's not out to be ambitious and get status and whatever. Somebody's back engineered it, and it's portable. And he said to me, well, write to this person and sign on, and at some point you'll find out more, like somebody else's site. I've got the name written down, I can't remember who it is. And he says people have tried this, and it's a teleportation portal, and you can sort of decide where you want to go and go by stepping through it. Now, maybe it doesn't work that well. Maybe people get screwed up and get lost and have to come back. But just think of that step forward. Just think about it for a minute. And now maybe you just want to teleport to, some other place in the country. Maybe you're not that keen to go to Mars. In fact, I would say probably don't do that. But just think about that for a minute. Portable teleportation portals. Just think about that. I'm quite charmed by the whole thing, I will tell you that. Anyway, that's my little bit of news from the Alien Cosmic Expo. There's all sorts of other interesting things, of course. A lady from New Zealand spoke eloquently about the incarnation process and her incarnation on Earth as a human being, and also incarnation on Earth via a spaceship where you take on some alien DNA as a choice. You're not forced into it, and come to Earth as a sort of a hybrid. Um, she was very interesting, and I felt that she had the principles of coming from the Godhead uh, into incarnation correctly. And I spoke to her about it afterwards, and I said, I'm with you on that one, dear. And because a lot of people don't quite get that. It's, I mean, they're feeling it out, but they don't quite get that we really are sparks of light in a sea of light. It's not just a metaphor. Well, it is a metaphor, but it's more than a metaphor. And we then, descend into incarnation. We lower our vibration, and we take on a causal body, and we take on a mental body, and finally you get an astral body, which puts you on the astral plane, getting ready to incarnate, and then you take on a physical body, and like a little ghost, you come into a fetus, and you check it out, and you go in and out. You don't stay there all the time. It's too tight. And a lot of the between life regression books, people will remember this. Hardly anybody remembers coming into a fetus, at insemination or gestation and staying there. Nobody does that. People go in and out. It's not that pleasant. I mean, you sort of acclimatize yourself to the experience and the vibrations and the mother's heartbeat and the mother's spirit and, all that sort of a thing. But you don't stay there. In and out, in and out. You go off back to the astral. Anyway, she got that right. And a lot of people don't quite get that. Researchers or experiencers, or, they get a vague sort of notion of what's going on. But she was very accurate. I was very pleased about that. And of course, she spoke a lot more about, hybrid souls and, that sort of a thing, which I'm not as experienced with. But the process of incarnation, I'm well up on that. And the various mental maneuvers that go into forming the fetus, choosing the DNA, making decisions with your guides. And they say, are you sure you want to be born with legs that don't work very well? Are you sure you want to be born with a predilection for this condition, this illness, that will challenge you all your life? And you will say as a spirit, yes, I want that experience. I want that challenge. I want that suffering. So I'm familiar with all of that. I've watched it. It's a little, on the cloudy mystical side, but I've been there watching it. And so when I speak to you of, and this is not last night, this is years ago, when I speak to you of young souls who die in desperately violent situations in third world, what we think of as third world ghettos, shanty towns, the chaotic situations in those environments where people are, being murdered and, tortured and, on a continual basis. This stuff goes on all the time in these places, whether it's South America or India or, Africa. And obviously North America and the ghettos of North America too. But it's worse in third world countries. Believe me, I've checked it out. Those souls are so attached to the shreds of life that they have had. They love family members too. I'm not depriving them of that attachment at all. That brings them back too, but it brings them back to such terrible living situations. And I realize I'm imposing first world standards on here, but it has a spiritual dimension too. These terrible living standards, if they keep going in and out of incarnation as these young souls do, very, very quickly, without any planning, just a desperation to get back in, they'll just whip into any fetus that they can find. They're usually not guides with them because they don't pay attention to guides or if they know about them or whatever. And they wind up being born in some terrible situation to some poor woman who's trafficked or forced into prostitution or got some terrible job where she dies very young, all this sort of a thing where there's no possibility, very little possibility of any kind of a creative life. And I mean spiritually creative, I don't mean, painting and, So I've observed that. When I speak of that, I'm telling you, I've observed it astrally. And there's a lot of sort of mad dashing about, and earthbound ghosts whipping around doing this and that. And when I'm observing it, I'm on a slightly different vibrational level. They don't really see me, and there's not much you can do for them. They ignore you, or if they've got shreds of religious faith, they think, they see you, they think you're some kind of an angel, and they're afraid of you. Not because you're going to be violent, but because you're a judgmental angel that's going to take them to hell or whatever they worry about. Just another little point about the various sort of avenues of incarnation, and that's one of them. But I don't think anyone watching this video will be going on that path. But it's something to be aware of. So obviously my thoughts on these matters are plumped up by having been to this highly stimulating interaction with speakers and the audience at the conference. And many vendors out in the hallways, selling their wares and services. I had a number of interesting chats with those people, energy workers and people with various kinds of psychic and spiritual talents, some of which I share, and I had some mutually beneficial discussions with channelers and different things, people. Sorry, things, just. It reminded me of the crop circle conferences I used to go to in the 90s in England. Very stimulating. And a small historical note. The first, I think it was 1992 in Winchester, England, the first international crop circle conference. Went to that and stayed for 3 days, had a blast. Information overload to the max. But the historical note is this. In 1992, what was I, about 40, I'm 65 now. A young man, one of many speakers, it was like five or six speakers every day, gave a talk on computer technology and communication and different things, which in 1991-92 was, a lot more primitive than it is now. And I knew next to nothing about it at all. And in the middle of his talk, he said, he held up something in the air and he said, "You see this? This is going to revolutionize how we communicate to each other." He said, "And this is called a modem, and I'm now going to explain to you what it does." And now, of course, we don't even think to talk about modems anymore, do we? But at that time, if you wanted information about crop circles, I subscribed to a magazine that came in the mail, black and white. And that was how I found out about crop circles. I think it came twice or 3 times a year. And that was how we found out. None of this, going to the crop circle connector and, watching videos of the latest one, from a microlight or a helicopter. My, were those primitive days. So it's very, very interesting to think on how, technology has influenced our spiritual paths and catalyzed them, the first time that somebody, and I've commented on this elsewhere, took a video of orbs seemingly creating a crop circle is the first one. And we were also surprised that half of us thought it was a fake. And it came into the world as anonymously. Whoever did it didn't admit to it, and the news agency that released it had a shadowy past that might have been connected to the British intelligence services. So there was a lot of that, and you can still see this one. Two little orbs dashing about, a field. I mean, quite obviously doing it, but people thought it had been created digitally or in the studio. And we argued about it a lot at the time. And mid-90s, I think it was. Then later, within a couple of summers, camcorders and those kind of things came out. And, everybody and their brother were videotaping orbs. So it entered the mainstream of thought and interaction in the crop circle community. But I do remember that first one and how distrustful we were, but because not everybody had a video camera. I mean, like we do now, like this little instrument that I'm using here, which takes a rather nice video and is idiot proof. Even a guy like me can operate it. So fascinating how these things influence our journeys. Let me just focus and see where, obviously, I've used up a lot of time. And again, this is the main problem with this. I cannot seem to squeeze everything into these videos in terms of what happened, what I experienced, where I went, yada yada yada. It's we're just getting selected highlights here, and that's something I didn't quite anticipate when we started out, and I feel like apologizing for it. And I'm sure you'll all be very forgiving on that matter. But I mean, if we're going to do the whole thing, we're looking at like 2-hour videos every day. And I don't think, A, I've got time to do it, and B, you've got time to watch it. So I'm afraid we're stuck with the selected highlights. I can't see any way out of it, which is not what I thought when we got started. It seems like now I'm focusing on it that after the intense sort of excitement and stimulation, shall we say, of the conference and coming home and winding down last night and enjoying being back at home, talking to my partner, that I floated out of my body and went to, where did I go? I first went out over the lake. I love to hover over Lake Ontario, which is Toronto and the suburbs are built right on it. And for many years now, I've experienced the pleasure, the joy of in one's astral body floating above the lake, and you feel the night breezes, of course. And when I say floating above, I mean like 100 feet or whatever, not that high up. And you do feel the sort of breezes, the night breezes coming and going. You hear the odd bird, and you attune yourself to the how shall I say, the vibrational balance between the nightlife of sleeping humans in the urban area that is just, a few hundred yards away. I'm only, half a mile out to the lake or something. And obviously there's the lights of the city and the stars in the sky and the marine life below you. And it's, how do I describe the vibrations of the marine life? I'm not sure how I describe that, but if you go into a meditative state, in your astral body, you will feel it. And that can be a challenge for those of you who are still at the wildly excited stage of traveling in your astral body. Um, you haven't got, you're too excited and thrilled to, do that kind of a meditation. That will come later. When later, I wouldn't know, but it will come. And there's this marvelous sense of being suspended in the vibrations of these various life forms and forms of nature. And to an extent, you will experience a tiny version of what the landscape devas, and these are large angelic devic beings that hover over large chunks of landscape. There's some absolute beauties over the Rockies, but they're all over the place. I just mentioned the ones in the Rocky Mountain chain as being particularly special. But the one that hovers over Toronto and that chunk of Lake Ontario and the Burlington Bay, which is a small bay just adjunct to Toronto, is approachable. You're not going to sit down and have a conversation with her. They all seem to have a sort of a feminine energy. I don't want to genderize it too much, and but she will welcome you as a conscious being that wishes to share, that rainbow of vibrations that she experiences. And my perception is she sort of cleanses them too. They pass through her, and in a washing machine tumble kind of way, and she sort of cleanses them in some way. I mean, I know that's vague and not too accurate, but I do get that sense. And she harmonizes. It's a big thing that they do. They harmonize vibrations. And in their own being, they harmonize vibrations. They don't sort of reach out an arm and adjust things, They harmonize by their own consciousness. So there is a marvelous harmony to be felt. And I did just an hour or so ago. The human vibrations, the nature spirit vibrations, all the water spirits, all the spirits of the air, which we can get into that sort of a thing in detail farther on down the line. And this perception that if you can focus on it long enough and sensitively enough, that all the various vibrations are one. They're all part of the one, the greater whole. And that includes, you're not going to feel the vibrations of the twinkling stars that are a little far away, but you sense them. They're there, and you can get a little feel for them. You can float up there and float into, go past the moon and feel, the asteroids and the stars more closely. You can do that, and people, I know people have done this and done videos on it. But in terms of floating where I was, that's the kind of harmony that one feels. And it's a perception of harmony that is, well, obviously it's marvelous and it's, blissful. And it leads to a sort of, almost a temporary abandonment of curiosity. Because when one's out in one's astral, flying around, or the mental body, as I like to, that's my favorite mode of transport, it suspends your curiosity because you're happy with what you have, or perceive, or are in. And that excited curiosity that makes you spin around your neighborhood and then the astral plane later, and finding out all kinds of interesting and exciting things as you explore, or remembering that you knew them already, that is suspended for a while, and that's an interesting experience because the excitement of astral travel is really powerful, and the thrill of the ride, and the endless variation of the inhabitants that you encounter and interact with. That is exciting, and to suspend that for a while is in itself is another form of excitement, but it's a stillness, it's a calmness, it's you know a break in the journey, as it were, and has a great value, I feel, um, because when some of you step into this world, this world of projection and discovery, the excitement really takes over, and you forget in the thrill of the moment that you've got eternity to do this. Um, uh, that's very easy to forget. And when you're in a more meditative space, as I've tried to describe, you give up that attachment for a while, the attachment to the excitement of exploration. And in a philosophical way, it is another attachment, just as the same as earthbound ghosts are attached to certain things, certain aspects of their incarnation that they can't give up. Whether it's the fear of going to hell because they were badly behaved, or the ignorance of materialism because they swallowed the wrong belief system and are absolutely convinced there's nothing, and or they feel unworthy within the belief system, and that's usually well, church-going folk, temple-going folk that feel they are too sinful and according to the standards that they've been spoon-fed since a child, and they will not move on to spirit. I mean, retrievers like myself, we try to encourage them to do so, and because they're not doing themselves any good hanging around, and so again, all these attachments, and I would say the attachment to astral curiosity is not a particularly painful one, or one that will upend your spiritual growth. It will teach you much, but on a higher philosophical level, it is an attachment, and it's always good to meditate on one's attachments and see them for what they are. Observe yourself and see what you're attached to, because in the process of freeing yourself completely and utterly from everything, your thoughts, your emotions, your body, your bodies, this one and all the others, you slowly return to the divine, the state of divine being, the state of omniscience and omnipresence, which I've spoken of many times. And I mean, you will get there anyway, but it's interesting to get back there consciously, whether you're just doing it for a while before another incarnation, or permanently, checking out into nirvana, which some people do. And it's an interesting experiment, and if you've been following my words in the last few minutes, I would urge you to try it sometime. There's no rush, any old time will do, but it's a fascinating experience, and this suspension of excitement and curiosity, and just, again, it's a sort of a Zen thing. You're living in the moment without desire for the next moment, or regret about the past moment, or attachment to either, so it's an astral version of living precisely in the moment and feeling the energies of now, without projection in either direction, whether we're talking linear direction of before and after, or the multidimensional notion of uh, that same thing. And when I say multidimensional, as opposed to linear, I'm thinking in linear you've got the previous moments and the future moments. With multidimensional, you've got that same thing, but you're not just thinking or perceiving on the plane that you're on. You're thinking of all the other planes as well, of which they're always there. Just as we're talking about this, as we move through our days, the astral plane and the mental plane and the causal plane and the worlds beyond form, the pure energy realms, they're all there, whether you're actively thinking about them or pursuing them. All that stuff goes on, just as life in other continents goes on, regardless of what we're doing in our neighborhoods here. A simple metaphor, but I think effective. You don't think about people, getting out of bed and going to work and having lunch in Paris if you're living in North America doing your thing. You might if there's a news item, but they do. It goes on, whether you think about them or not. And it's the same with the astral plane. The astral plane existed before your dearly beloved family member died and went there. And, you're just focusing on it for that that span of grief and remembrance. The multidimensional meditation that you can do, living in the now, it includes that, rather than just the before and after scenario that you're seeking detachment from. And when you are astral traveling, it is very much easier to be thinking on, activities on the various planes. And very stimulating. You become more of a giant mind than you are when in your physical body. You are a giant mind in your physical body, but you've got boundaries where you shut that down in order to focus on your day-to-day activities, and that is something that all of you will have to face as you go through your astral travels and the expansion of your astral travels, because that will come to you, the consciousness of that, as you're living your daily life, trying to focus on this task and that task, and it's a challenge, and you learn how to block it out in order to function well. So, but that all comes. It's not, none of it's impossible. None of it is something that you have to give up on. You will pursue it at your, I won't say your leisure, but at the speed that you are comfortable with, and not the speed that I'm comfortable with, or anyone else, but the speed that you're comfortable with. And more power to you for doing that. That's the way to go. There are many things to discover in the magic garden of the universe, and I wish you joy in uncovering them at your own pace. And until next time, which will arrive sooner than we all think, I bid you farewell.